My name is Elaine Barker. I'm 71 years old, a widow, and I thought I knew what family meant. I thought if you give enough time, money, a space, they'd remember who gave it. But last Sunday, my son stood in a church full of people and told the pastor I was just extended family. So now I'm just extending him a deadline. 30 days. Then he's gone. Elaine Barker never asked for much. Not after Marvin passed. Not after the second hip surgery. Not even after she let her only son, Brandon, move into the lower unit of her duplex rent-free. She told herself it was what mothers do. Help their kids get started. Brandon had just gotten married. Jenna was sweet enough, if a little curated. Always smiling for photos. Always redecorating things that didn't need changing. Elaine let it go. She didn't charge them a dime in rent. She covered the electric and water bills. When the water heater burst last winter, she paid for a full replacement, $1,200 out of her savings. She even surprised them with a week-long honeymoon at a bed and breakfast in Asheville. Said it was her way of passing the torch. Every Sunday, Elaine cooked dinner, meatloaf, pot roast, cobbler, the kind of food that used to bring Brandon running to the table when he was 10. She watched their dog when they traveled. She took care of their plants, folded their laundry more than once. And when Jenna got pregnant, Elaine offered to babysit after her morning walk. 3 days a week, no pay. She said she'd be honored. She never kept score, not really, but she did keep the receipts, tucked in a little folder in her desk drawer, not because she planned to use them, just because sometimes, when you give everything, it's nice to remember you were part of the building block. Elaine didn't need a medal. She didn't want applause. She just hoped, deep down, that one day Brandon would look at her and say, "Thanks, Mom. We couldn't have done it without you." Instead, one Sunday, he looked at a pastor and said, "Oh, that's just extended family. She can sit in the back." And Elaine, she didn't cry. Not in public. She just smiled and wrote down the date. Elaine pressed the edge of her gift tighter to her chest. A worn, leather-bound Bible wrapped in soft blue tissue paper, with Brandon and Jenna's wedding date embossed on the inside cover. Her husband's handwriting still marked the verse he'd underlined for their own wedding. It was a quiet gift, a meaningful one. She arrived early to the church, wanting to help with setup. That's what mothers do, right? Bring something? Lend a hand. Show up. The usher smiled as she walked in. The air smelled of lemon oil and eucalyptus wreaths. Elaine felt a small twinge of pride. Her son was starting a new chapter. She straightened her blouse, took a step toward the altar, but Jenna spotted her first. "Oh, Mrs. Barker, you're early?" Her smile was tight, her tone higher than usual. Elaine nodded. "I brought something, and I figured I'd grab a good seat." Then Brandon came over, adjusting his tie, not really making eye contact. And that's when it happened. A simple question from Pastor Reeves. "Would you like your mother seated in the family pew?" And Brandon, her baby boy, chuckled. "Ah, she's just extended family. She's good in the back." The world didn't spin. It froze. The words didn't echo. They landed like stone. Elaine blinked, kept smiling, and said, "Of course." She walked to the last pew, right next to a fussy toddler playing with a plastic cup and a mom scrolling on her phone. And you? If you've ever sat at the edge of a moment you helped build, only to be told you don't belong, drop A in the comments. I think some of us understand that silence all too well. From the back row, Elaine could see it all. Jenna's parents in the front, beaming like royalty. Everyone shaking hands, hugging, giving thanks. Not one mention of the woman who paid for their honeymoon, who scrubbed the baby's bottles, who let them repaint her basement and never complained when they painted over Marvin's old trim. Elaine sat still, hands clasped, not praying, but counting. Counting how many names were thanked, counting how many people smiled past her, counting what it costs to disappear in plain sight. When the congregation stood to sing, Elaine remained seated. Not in protest, in grief. Not one tear fell. But inside, something cracked. Not her heart, her patience. Elaine didn't bring it up. Not after church. Not after dinner. Not even after she overheard Jenna telling someone at Bible study that Elaine was just Marvin's widow who lives upstairs. She kept cooking Sunday meals, kept folding tiny onesies, kept smiling through the shifting sand beneath her feet. But she started noticing things The framed photos she hung in the hallway, gone. Replaced by farmhouse signs that said things like, "Our happy place," and "Home is where the chaos lives." The antique platter she used every Thanksgiving, now in a cracked plastic bin in the garage labeled "Donate." One morning, she went to look for a quilt Marvin's mother had made, only to find all of her keepsakes pushed to the far side of the basement, stacked behind Jenna's seasonal decor bins. Fall, spring, baby's first Easter, and Halloween, and on top of one bin, in Jenna's handwriting, was a label that read, "Elaine's memory, clutter." That one stung. But the moment that broke something loose came later that week. Brandon had left the basement printer running. Elaine, hearing the odd mechanical noise, went downstairs to check it. Sitting in the tray was a half-printed draft of an email. She wasn't snooping. She didn't have to. "Once Mom passes, we'll have full title. Should be clear by next spring. Let's meet with the agent again. She said comps are looking great in this zip code." Elaine stood there in her robe and slippers, holding the warm piece of paper that proved what she was starting to suspect. She wasn't a mother anymore. She was an obstacle. A line item, a future listing. The room didn't spin, but it did dim. She folded the page carefully and slid it into her desk drawer upstairs, right behind the folder labeled Receipts. Brandon and Jenna, Year 1. The next morning, she woke early, made coffee, and stared out the window at the yard she had landscaped herself. The daffodils were blooming, the same ones she planted when Brandon was in second grade, the ones he used to bring to her in clumsy handfuls every spring. She hadn't seen him do that in years, and maybe now, maybe he wouldn't even think to. Elaine didn't confront Brandon. She didn't wave the printed email in his face or cry at the dinner table. She didn't shout, slam doors, or post vague Bible quotes online. That wasn't her style. Instead, the next morning, she made herself a fresh pot of coffee, pulled out the manila folder labeled House Papers, Lower Unit, and sat down at her desk. The lease agreement was still there, notarized, tucked neatly between a checklist of maintenance costs and Marvin's old notes about property tax deductions. Elaine hadn't looked at it in years, but the clause was still there. Just like Marvin had insisted, owner retains sole discretion to terminate tenancy with 30 days written notice. No cause required. She traced the sentence with her fingertip once. Then again, her heart didn't pound. It steadied. For years, she'd convinced herself that silence was grace, that love meant letting things slide, that family mattered more than boundaries, more than dignity, more than peace. But that email, "Once Mom passes," had peeled back the last layer. Her son hadn't just forgotten her. He'd planned around her absence. He'd drawn up a future that didn't include her breath in it. That morning, Elaine opened a new document on her laptop and typed 4 words. Notice of termination letter. It wasn't out of revenge. It was out of necessity. She added the date, the address, the legal clause, her signature. Then she printed it, slid it into a plain envelope, and left it on her nightstand. She didn't rush to deliver it. Just knowing it existed made her stand taller. She poured herself another cup of coffee, stirred in a spoon of honey, and stared out at the pine tree Marvin planted the year Brandon was born. It had grown tall, twisting a bit at the top, leaning, but never broken. Elaine whispered to herself, "Not bitter, just clear. You mistook my love for weakness. You mistook my presence for permanence. That's on you." That night, she reread her will, and for the first time, she didn't cry while crossing out Brandon's name. She simply reached for a pen, wrote in someone else's, a person who had shown up, who had called, who had remembered her birthday. Then she folded the new copy and whispered to the quiet room, "This time, I'm not the one being erased." She turned off the lamp and slept. All the way through the night, Elaine waited 3 days after signing the notice. She didn't slam it down on their kitchen counter. She didn't tape it to their door. She simply slid it, quietly, into their mailbox, folded neatly in an envelope with a small paperclip and a single yellow post-it that read, "Please review." That was it. Brandon didn't knock that night. But Elaine heard the muffled argument downstairs, the sharp whisper of, "She can't be serious," followed by the sound of Jenna pacing hard across the floorboards, like her anger could shake ownership. The next morning, Elaine brewed her coffee like usual, walked her usual loop around the neighborhood. She passed by Mrs. Dunley's garden and waved, smiled at the postman, and picked up a flyer for a women's walking group pinned to the community board. That evening, she made a casserole, one for herself, one for her new neighbor, someone she'd spoken to only once but who'd complimented her flower beds. It felt good to cook without obligation, to hand over a warm dish without expectation of thank you notes or Instagram stories. She had also called her lawyer, not to vent. Elaine wasn't a woman who wasted anyone's time. She simply said, remove Brandon and Jenna from the title, from the will, and from any future assumptions. I've made my peace with it. Now I want it in writing. That afternoon, she opened her closet and pulled out the old cedar box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were family photos, her wedding veil, the baby blanket Brandon had once spit up on, then clutched for 2 years like it was magic. She didn't cry. She simply held the blanket to her chest, sat in the rocker by the window, and whispered, I loved you well, but I won't let you shrink me. Downstairs, Brandon and Jenna were busy packing boxes, but not to move out just yet. No. Not yet. They were still arguing about how to fix it, how to frame it, how to regain control. But Elaine didn't listen through the vents anymore. She had soft jazz playing now, a diffuser puffing lavender into the hallway, and a single sheet of paper framed on her kitchen wall that read, Peace is not polite. It's earned, and for the first time in years. She didn't feel like a guest in her own home. She felt like the woman who built it. 30 days came and went. On the morning Brandon and Jenna were supposed to vacate, Elaine didn't wait by the window. She didn't hover by the mailbox or double-check the locks. She brewed her tea, Earl Grey, 2 sugars, and folded her laundry like it was any other Wednesday. By 2 p.m., the lower unit was quiet. The blinds were drawn. The porch was empty, except for a stack of sealed boxes labeled seasonal decor and Miski's kitchen. At 4:10. A rental truck pulled into the driveway. Jenna stayed inside. Brandon did most of the lifting. Quiet, heavy-footed, not making eye contact. Elaine watched from the kitchen just long enough to see him glance up once toward her window, then look away. No knock, no apology, no goodbye. She didn't need one. That evening, she opened the window to air out the living room and noticed the silence, full, clean, undisturbed. No clatter of video game sounds from downstairs, no passive-aggressive footstep, just the hum of wind chimes and a distant bark from a neighbor's retriever. The next morning, she walked into the lower unit with a clipboard and a candle. The rooms were empty. Wiped, but not thoughtfully. One scuff on the wall, a sticky cabinet handle, a faint smell of vanilla air freshener and entitlement. She stood in the center of what used to be their space and whispered, Mine. Again, she didn't rush to repaint. She didn't sanitize the memory. Instead, she left a window cracked and called Camille, her realtor. By Friday, the listing was live. Lower unit available. Quiet, owner, occupied duplex. No family tenants. That Sunday, Elaine dressed in her navy blue skirt and a brooch shaped like a dove. She walked into church alone, as usual. But something felt different. People looked up when she walked in. Some nodded. Others smiled. Not with pity, but with a quiet sense of respect. No one called her Brandon's mom. No one offered a seat in the back. She sat third pew from the front, her usual spot. Only now, it felt earned. After service, Mrs. Langley, who used to always stand with Jenna at potlucks, approached with a homemade card and said softly, I didn't know. I wish I had sooner. Elaine smiled, not bitter, just steady. Now you do. The whispers weren't rumors anymore. They were corrections. Truth retold. Brandon didn't show that Sunday. Neither did Jenna. But Elaine didn't check. Didn't scroll. Didn't search their names on Facebook. Instead, she came home, took off her shoes, and watered her daffodils, now blooming in full. She lit a lavender candle, opened her new lease file, and placed it in the cabinet under peacekeeping. On her nightstand sat a letter, hand-addressed to her goddaughter, Amelia, the one who never forgot her birthday. Inside was the updated will, a note that read, Legacy is not about blood, it's about showing up. If you've ever been pushed to the edges of a life you helped build, if someone ever made you feel like just extended family in your own story, Drop A in the comments. Because sometimes recognition doesn't come from those who share your blood. It comes from those who finally see the truth. You are never in the background. You are the foundation.